uncensored and unedited. And Andrei Sakharov, the prime Soviet dissident of these times, has just been freed and made available to American TV networks for interviews. Priorities are shifting in the Kremlin. To probe the depth of the current change in Soviet attitudes, Monitor Reports invited Georgi Arbatov to take part in a discussion in Washington of the full range of Soviet-American disagreements. Dr. Arbatov is one of the Kremlin's best informed and most outspoken critics of American policy. American Air Force General David C. Jones joined us. General Jones is an expert on both nuclear and conventional arms. He's former chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. The resulting discussion, a unique sample of what it's like behind the closed doors of a face-to-face superpower exchange. Gentlemen, arms control negotiations seem to many people to be nothing more than a symptom of a very dangerous distrust that exists between these two important nations. Dr. Arbatov, let me begin with you and ask you, what are the limits of Soviet trust in America?
I think you put it in not a very correct way. What are the alternatives? We have to have the minimal trust to enter into negotiation. The point is here that when you start to negotiate, usually, if you start it with good intentions, with real intentions, you increase already trust. You know, I couldn't imagine, General, that in late 60s, for instance, that we will come to a moment when our official negotiators will talk about most sensitive points of our national security. But now it has become normal.
General Jones, is trust a factor in these relationships?
I think it clearly is. And in my discussions in Moscow and here with Dr. Arbatov and general staff and so forth, it's clear they don't trust us and we don't trust them.
If we were sitting in an American living room, they would say, but we've got two societies here which are very, very different. And there seem to be fundamental factors about those two societies which interfere with living comfortably with each other. One society, Dr. Arbatov, seems to be, to us, a closed society. Another one seems, in contrast, very open. Maybe
yes,
this
especially with Iran. Contrast scandal and all of this. It looks terribly open, you know, how for many years things were closed. But go on, yes, I understand it.
But all right, do you see, are there signs that we should be noticing of change in Soviet society which deal with this sense of openness, with an American perception that this is an oppressive, closed society? This is a perception.
I will give you answer in two parts. The first part, we don't like a lot of things about your society.
Good. We'll talk about those.
Yes, and you don't like about ours. But we just have no way out. You know, it's even not like marriage when you can get a divorce. We are doomed to live together on this planet. We are chained to each other, and we have to understand it. And we have to learn to live with differences. The second part is about evolution and changes in societies. I hope there will be changes to the good of American people in this society. And we are undergoing a period of very serious changes in Soviet Union at this moment.
What kinds of things should we notice about those changes, specifically?
I think that actually what might be important for you is our foreign policy. And this is a very obvious thing that in a year and a half, our positions have changed very, very seriously. Not in the sense that we had a warlike policy 2 years ago, but in the sense that we brought our political philosophy and our political practice much more. This process will never end and has not ended, much closer to the realities of life, to understanding of the changed nature of international relations than it was ever before. Our perception of security, for instance, the principle of our approach to security is that we cannot have security on the expense or to the detriment of the other side. We can have security only together with you, not against you. We either perish or live together. And that we have even to care about your security. If you feel insecure, you are a dangerous partner.
When you sit down in these conversations, do you feel that the Soviets are really caring about your security?
We have doubts about their caring about our security. On the other hand, I agree with Yuri that we've got to somehow live together. Each side has about 25,000 nuclear weapons. We have fundamental differences in our society. Hopefully we can make some progress. We do see some opening in the Soviet Union. They've published 4 articles in Pravda now that have been written by people from the West, and not a word has been changed. They've had rebuttal to it. But I think there are little actions of opening, but it's a long time before we'll come to a common understanding of goals in this world, and there'll be a lot of mistrust. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't proceed with arms control. And I think there's a making of a good agreement that would be in the best security interest of both sides. So in that narrow area, yes, it could help their security and it could help our security. Whether we'll reach that point, I don't know.
Do you feel the Americans care about your security?
Well, there are different Americans. I think there are a lot of Americans with whom it could be understood in realistic terms. It is not a love affair. We don't need to love each other, but there are a lot of Americans who understand, I think, that they have to take into account our legitimate interests, and we should take into account their legitimate interests. But there are some Americans for whom the sheer idea of coexistence with us is something absolutely alien. They consider us to be an evil empire which has to be destroyed in one way or another. And the only reason why we are not destroyed is that they cannot do it.
I wonder if the Soviets would be willing. We had talk on conventional arms, and that's the hardest part, as we agreed to come to an agreement on. But we also agreed that as we bring down nuclear weapons, the conventional arms become more important, and at some point it becomes dominant if you come down far enough. And so we have now opened a dialogue. Our governments have opened it, and others have opened it, as to how to do something about the conventional issue here between our two countries. I wonder if the Soviets would ever agree to a world where there were no foreign troops in either Eastern Europe or Western Europe.
I guarantee you that we would agree.
And with that, we'd have to be sure there weren't Soviet troops marshaled on the border of East Poland,
you would agree? Let me just...
and East Czechoslovakia.
Well, you know, this again, I can foresee a world where we can have a very, very serious, even complete disarmament, well, with exclusion of border troops somewhere. In far future, I'm sorry to say. But we have put on the table, it is on the table, our proposal to dismantle both military blocs in Europe, which will mean also withdrawal of troops.
I want to pursue political versus military in just a moment. We'll be right back.
This is the international daily newspaper that's won 5 Pulitzer Prizes for news coverage. It's the newspaper famous for its unbiased editorial policy that lets you make up your own mind. It's often called the best international newspaper in the world. It's the Christian Science Monitor. The Monitor is read daily at the White House, in both houses of Congress, and by world leaders and opinion makers everywhere. It provides valuable insight and understanding of the news for people who need the complete picture. The Monitor is famous for its honest, up-to-the-minute, exclusive stories because it reports the facts accurately and candidly, without sensationalism. The Monitor covers the news around the globe and around the corner, with balanced, comprehensive reporting to help you understand. No wonder the Monitor is one of the world's most respected newspapers, with 5 Pulitzer Prizes and 11 Overseas Press Club awards. Shouldn't you subscribe to the Monitor today? Now you can. Call this number and get 4 months of the Monitor delivered 5 days a week to your door for only $19.95. Save almost 50% off the basic price. 4 months for only $19.95. And you may cancel at any time. Subscribe today. the Monitor. Call 1-800-554-6565. 1-800-554-6565.
American Heritage Magazine. It's been called the greatest magazine of history in the world. Right now, you can get a year of American Heritage, 6 big bi-monthly issues for just $18. Call now and we'll also send you free the American Heritage Dictionary, the hardbound, concise family edition. Get a year of American Heritage and the free 800-page dictionary. Call 1-800-554-7000.
Interesting point, gentlemen, about withdrawing troops from all of Europe. Did I hear that correctly? Are you
Yes.
both
Both saying that you would see eye to eye on having no foreign troops in Europe?
Yes, if the proposal is ever.
But now, does this mean Soviet
Accept-
troops along the
accept-
Polish frontier?
Well, you know, will you have troops in the United States territory? Where should we put our troops until we have some military force beyond the Urals? Then the Chinese will feel insecure, you know. But it can be reasonably done in such way that not a single country. You know, Finland, I don't think that Finland, who is our neighbor, feels endangered by our troops. It is just a case of relationship.
But aren't you both saying that military power is less and less effective as a resolving model for these relationships? Would you agree with that,
I'm
General?
sorry, I will maybe offend General, but I have this feeling that he is now retired,
you know,
but
there
his
is-
successors will
there's a-
become sometimes less important.
But you have generals looking over your shoulder as well. Would they feel comfortable with this statement?
If they become unemployed, they will not feel comfortable. But you know, I think at least some of our generals understand very good that we live in a world where there is less and less room for military decision of problems between states.
General Jones,
Yes.
address this point.
President Carter one time asked me a very good and interesting question, all philosophical. He said, do you think the world would be better off if all of a sudden all nuclear weapons could disappear overnight and the ability to build them disappear overnight? You know, it's a good question. And on the one hand, there's something wrong with man having in his hands the tools of his own destruction. 25,000 weapons each. I mean, just a terrible destructive power. On the other hand, if they disappeared just like that, overnight or even in the 10 years we talked about at Reykjavik, it would make the world safe for conventional war. And I use that word safe advisedly. I mean, the nuclear weapons have made us live together. I'm not sure we would have lived together as well if it hadn't been for the deterrent power of nuclear weapons.
Isn't Afghanistan an instance where this point is proved?
You know, I will at first, if you allow me, disagree with General. I think he's fundamentally wrong. I think the first thing, we had not had war in this 41 year of nuclear era, not because of nuclear weapon, maybe partially because of good statesmanship at some moments, like it was during, let's say, Cuban Missile Crisis. We managed to do it. And sometimes due to sheer luck. And you can never say that next 40 years will be the same. On the other hand, I think that the sheer appearance of nuclear weapons has tremendously militarized our societies, our mentality, international relations, and therefore also you know, made a very, very fertile ground for conventional arms race in conventional weapons. I think that conventional war is not conventional anymore. And for Europe, for instance, and for us, it would be practically as destructive as nuclear war nowadays. Therefore, we have also, I think the time runs out to consider all our relations only in terms of having fear of doing bad things. We have to become more moral. But until this time comes when the thing changes, I think we can do it without nuclear weapons.
Two questions. Do you see the possibility that nuclear arms might never be used, Dr. Arbatov?
Well, I think they should never be.
Yeah, but how do you, looking at the realpolitik of this
I think if we go on like we do, we are sure to get into a mess with weapons, to have this arms race, because it itself generates fears now, and they can come up. The time for solutions become shorter and shorter, and you give more and more to the computers, and we have learned the hard way by Challenger and Chernobyl that even the very, well-tested systems can go wrong. And there is more also room for third powers to become nuclear, for accidents, etc. So I think we have to understand, and I don't think you disagree with me, that if we go on like we did in this 40 years, we will get into a serious mess.
Part of the reason I raised Afghanistan was because so often the provocations seem to be in these peripheral, often third world areas, and perhaps we should talk a minute about policy there. Take Iran. Wonderment among Americans, do the Soviets really want to take over Iran to get some warm water ports, get real jurisdiction over that valuable oil territory? And is that the kind of scenario that leads to this trouble that you cite?
Well, I think the whole American policy for a long time as it evolved couldn't exist without this Soviet menace. And therefore a lot of scenarios were invented on all sorts of things, and bomber gaps and missile gaps and a lot of other gaps, and also this myth about our desire to get to warm seaport. I don't think any reasonable leader in Soviet Union would want to get, in addition to the problems we have, a problem like Iran. It would be a mad decision,
Well, we tend to see a Soviet under every bed, and the Soviets tend to see an American under every bed. I mean, there's so much misunderstanding here.
Let's come back to the problems under the beds in just a moment.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Stay with us.
(1986), a year of tragedy, of triumph, a year of ideals, and I do. 1986 in focus.
Tonight.
In Chicago, there is only one supermarket named One Stop. One Stop. Buy the can or buy the case. Check their everyday low prices on frozen and fresh chicken wings, packed in 40 or 30-pound boxes. One Stop. 4301 South Lake Park Avenue in Chicago. They're open 7 a.m. on Saturdays. That's One Stop. 4301 South Lake Park Avenue, Chicago.
A beautiful oil painting in an exquisite frame. In a gallery, you could pay as much as $1,000 for paintings like these. But this Sunday only at a spectacular showing by Collector's Art, you'll be able to buy oils like you see here for a fraction of those high gallery prices. Plus over 3,000 paintings to be sold out from $14 to $39. Incredible. This Sunday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in Arlington Heights at the Arlington Park Hilton. In Hillside at the Holiday Inn. In Oak Lawn at the Hilton. In Homewood at the Sheraton. In Skokie at the Holiday Inn. In Waukegan at the Sheraton. And in Maryville, Indiana at the Holiday Plaza.
Now you can report crime in your neighborhood without giving your name. Call 372-0101. Gang violence has become commonplace, but it's rarely reported. If you see any crime, call 372-0101. Violent crime will continue to increase unless local citizens help. Don't lose your neighborhood to crime, like illegal drugs. Almost 1,000 drug arrests have resulted from calls to the Chicago Crime Commission at 372-0101.
When we left, gentlemen, we were talking about the American fear that there's a communist under every bed and the Soviet fear that there's an imperialist American under their beds. General Jones, is this a danger for the future? Can we break away from these cliches ever?
Oh, I think we can. There's increased understanding. One thing I've strongly advocated is military-to-military talks. And I was...
You're talking about active duty officers.
Duty, yeah. I spent my last visit to Moscow, spent some time with Marshal Akramayov, chief of their general staff. And it was very useful, although I'm not on active duty, but I'd like to see active duty discussions. In discussion with the Soviets, they agree, but they've said that we've got to make progress before that can be accomplished. I submit that there is so much misunderstanding among the military on both sides.
You know, but
sometimes
you missed the chance. You had brought
Reykjavik.
To Reykjavik.
We made a mistake by not having our chairman at Reykjavik.
Yes.
But now
they have said you have to make progress. I submit that in a lot of these areas, you could make progress by military-to-military discussions, not of political subjects, not arms control issues, but understanding.
Military doctrine.
Military doctrine. When we started talking
Are your generals prepared to talk about this sort of thing?
Well, I think not all American generals are prepared, but some are, and I think the same must be true for Soviet Union. But there are, and I see some point in what you say. I see the militaries who are in contact due to the negotiations we have, and I see that their views broaden. But there are some paranoid figures, which I don't want to name them, especially because they are Americans and will feel offended. Who
He
come
might like
with,
to name some who are Soviets who would be offended also.
Maybe. But who come with already a set-up mind, and whatever they see or hear is just for them reaffirmation that I told you.
The Soviets think we're paranoid. We know they are.
Looking down the road.
If you live safer with it, then live it.
Dr. Arbatov, as you look upon the current complications in Washington, and I put quote marks about those complications, do you have a sense that relationships between the two countries will have to just take a back seat for the next 2 years? Does this concern you?
I don't know what will happen in Washington, but I know that before this scandal, I make it without quote marks,
all right,
erupted, the relations were bad enough already. The retreat from Reykjavik was already accomplished. The Cold War language and evil empire language reappeared in president's speeches. So we had nothing to lose here. We didn't invent it. This was a problem you created yourself. You Americans, I mean. And you have to solve it itself. We have no part in it. But I don't think we lost anything. From our side, we would hate the idea that we will lose another 2 years. And we will be open and are open to resumption of serious negotiations.
Dr. Arbatov, you brought up Krasnoyarsk earlier. How serious is the possibility of stopping work on Krasnoyarsk, the big radar?
Oh, please, we are ready to do it. If you stop work or dismantle your 2 radars, one in Thule in Greenland and one in Great Britain, which is not yet built as far as I know, then we'll stop it. And in general, I think General would agree with me. There are violations and violations.
That's a problem we have in all the agreements. They're not written so tightly that each side can interpret it and do it. We think we've got a very strong case, and I would like to tell our Soviet colleagues that I don't believe they understand the depths of concern in America on verification and compliance. I mean, it's going to be an impediment not only by the people who are, you might say, are not enthusiastic about arms control or opposed to arms control, but on through the whole spectrum. in America.
I think we understand it now much more than we understood it ever, and you would agree with me that our position on verification procedures has changed very dramatically.
Americans are concerned about a couple other things in their future scenario. One is always persistent, that's Afghanistan. Would the Soviets see any other means, any other good offices, United Nations, for example, as a means to assisting the withdrawal?
We use United Nations. Kardovis is the Deputy General Secretary, Secretary General of United Nations, is taking an active part in it. And we would invite everybody who can help to find a peaceful solution, including Americans.
All right.
They are welcome.
Dr. Arbatov, you had the first question. General Jones, you get the last comment.
Well, I do think there's some hope in the relations between our two countries. By just having a dialogue, we clear up some of the problems. It won't, they won't change their society. We're not going to change our society, and so there'll be fundamental differences. But we do have a common interest, and that is that we not have a major war between our two countries. We may have different interests on a local scene in that regard, but a nuclear war between the two countries would be devastating for the world. So I think we have that common interest.
General David Jones, academician Georgi Arbatov, thank you both very much.
The New Yorker. It is not the ordinary person who would eagerly await a visitor such as this, who for a few hours each week would put aside career, hobbies, health club, and do something that is rare today. Read. The New Yorker. It begins with an insider's guide to what's happening in movies, theater, music, dance, and art. Add to that the best fiction, nonfiction, and poetry of our time, previewed in the New Yorker sometimes months in advance. And throughout it all, you get laughter. Those legendary New Yorker cartoons. Call now and get 52 weekly issues of the New Yorker for just $25.95. Save more than $50 off the $78 cover price. Also, get this New Yorker cartoon sampler book free. At a price like this, you may even want to order two.
Call 1-800-372-3800. 1-800-372-3800.
You can know all the rules of the road, but you don't have any control over that other driver. That's why the right insurance protection is so important. That's why Goldblatt's insurance agency is so important to you. With no money down and just 10 low payments of only $39.40 a month, you can get a full year of auto coverage liability, even if you're a new or young driver, have been canceled, or need financial responsibility. Goldblatt's low-cost insurance agency can protect you now. Call 645-1995. That's 645-1995.
The fashion star of the season has arrived at Designer's Mart. That's 500 sequin garments, 1 and 2 pieces, all in unusual designs and one of a kind. Here we have a $500 garment for $149.88. Here we have a $1,000 garment for $298. Come and get your sequin garments and be the star of the season yourself at Designer's Mart, 111 East Ontario and 16 West Washington.
Next week on Monitor Reports, we take a close look at air travel at crowded skies and congested airports. And we'll listen to the comments of travelers who are becoming more and more concerned about service and safety. Until then, I'm Rob Nelson for the Christian Science Monitor.
For a printed copy of today's program, send $2 to Monitor Reports, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
Deborah Carr, Barry Bostwick, and Jenny Seagrove star in the television premiere of Barbara Taylor Bradford's A Woman of Substance.
Tuesday night at 7 on Channel 9.
And it's Vehicle coming up on the outside. Vehicle, and in lane 4, it's Favors. Favors is going to win the gold medal. Alonzo Favors of the United States wins it. I believe Vehicle got second, and McKay winds up third.
You never know what you can do until you try. To succeed, it takes education, training, and hard work. That's true in sports or this high-tech world we live in. you've got to go with the best. That's why I chose the Air Force as my place to succeed. The Air Force is a technology leader, offering education and training to young men and women from all walks of life.